ready to go. All right, the Penn State Blitz is back here on PennLive, and Greg, it really this week is the Penn State recruiting blitz.
That's right.
Because I think the fan base has been wanting to see a little activity on the recruiting front. It had been kind of slow this year going into this past week, and I know you were busy.
Yep.
A very busy 5-day span, and I think Penn State's really helped themselves in the future. I think 5 players, all uniquely different. Very talented players, and one very distinctive headliner in the 5-star Brandon Smith.
Yeah, no question about it. One of the things that we've heard so often in the overtime segment, which you can leave your questions now for that, is where are all the commits at? When are they going to start getting more and more? Penn State comes out of April, which is 3. Caden Wallace pledges at the Blue White game. Before that, Bob, it was just 2 all the way back to November when Jaquan Brisker, the quarterback, committed. So the question was, when was the excitement going to start again? And it started last Thursday when Jaquan Brisker, the #1 JUCO safety in America, committed. Then you follow that up with Devyn, the 4-star running back, on Friday. Sunday night, Marquis Wilson, sort of surprised. I don't know if it was a surprise, but he wasn't scheduled to announce, and he pulled the trigger at that point as well, defensive back. Then you roll into Monday, and a very good Monday for James Franklin, Tyler Rudolph, and then also, as you mentioned, Brandon Smith, the 5-star linebacker. It's been a long time since Penn State landed a 5-star linebacker. Now, keep in mind, Micah Parsons, Penn State made the decision to make him a linebacker, but he was an end when he was recruited. So, to me, Bob, it was the kind of momentous push that they have had pretty often under James Franklin. It just never really took this long in a recruiting cycle, but now that it's here, they're up to 8 commits, number 14 in the country, and only have pretty much from here to go up.
Yeah. Just a reminder to all you folks out there to go to YouTube / all Penn State for all of the Penn State Blitz videos, all the Penn State football videos, all things Penn State, all of the recruiting stuff. Get to second down here now. It's going to be a pretty recruiting heavy theme here. When you look at what all the activity that happened with the 5 players, best get of the 5 in your mind?
Yeah, I mean, I think you probably have to start with Smith. I think when you look at where Penn State was on the linebacker front, it's not that they've recruited the position poorly over the years, but just think about it, Bob. Yeah. When was the last big-name, surefire linebacker that Penn State landed? Again, Parsons doesn't count because he came in as an end, and Penn State decided to move him to linebacker, but in terms of that, I mean, you did have Lucada, the 4-star from Erie, that came in the last class, but Tar Burton's already moved to defensive line. And you go back a little bit. I mean, Ellis Brooks was a 4-star, but he didn't have play year 1 potential. So Smith, to me, has that. So he's the one that really jumps off the page.
Yeah, just going back a little before your time, I can remember when they got Michael Mauti, who is a legacy, but he was very much in the 4 or 5-star range, and also Dan Connor, the Pennsylvania standout. I think he played in 2004, 2005, I believe, as another really big-name linebacker. Just real quick to follow up on him. So is there a comparison to be made talent-wise between Brandon Smith and a guy like Micah Parsons, or are they completely different players?
No, I don't think they're completely different. I do think Parsons probably has a little bit of an athleticism edge, but I think Smith would equal that out with knowing how to play linebacker. I mean, not that Micah doesn't know how to play it, but, I mean, we talked often. He played in high school. He played defensive end. He played running back. He caught pass. The one thing he never really did was actually play linebacker, or at least the way you have to play it at the college level. So I make him comparable. It's just one maybe a little bit further ahead than the other. Of course, Micah has a lot of time to close that gap.
Right.
And Smith has a lot of time to grow into he's already a very, very explosive player. There's just few in the country that are on Parsons' level in that regard. So, yeah, I mean, I think that they're fairly comparable, and you can expect to see them both, I think, on the field for Penn State for 2-3 years at least together before, you see what the future holds from there.
Okay, so Brandon Smith is your best get. Biggest recruiting surprise to date?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's when you look at what Terry Smith in the corners room has done and how they've really restocked the cupboard there. And I don't know if necessarily need it restocked, but you do lose 2 starters from last year. You will lose John Reed, I believe, and Amani Wari at the end of this year.
John Reed will have a year left, but he could opt to leave. Amani's done after this year.
You move Lamont Wade to safety. Now, granted, you could slide back or play with the nickel, but I think that for Penn State, it's not that they don't have corner depth. I just feel like, and these guys could all play safety. safety too. So you look at Marquis Wilson, same thing. He more than likely is a corner only. Tyler Rudolph is a corner or a safety. Brisker is a safety. So you have flexibility there as well. And I think that the other thing to keep in mind is that the safety job, you're going to need depth there at some point.
Yeah.
So I think it was a domino effect a little bit with that. It's almost full, if not completely full at this point.
One more for you. Of the group, most college ready would be?
I think it'd have to be Brisker. I mean, he's playing, junior college ball already. So I think that, he's probably in line to be on track there. If you look at some of the quotes that have come out of Lackawanna about him, it's more or less that this kid was one of the few first-year players that forced himself onto the field early in their season last year. He had very good numbers, and yeah, I mean, he's right there. Smith would be a close second, but I'd give Brisker the nod just because of where he's playing.
Okay, now third down here on the Penn State Blitz here on PennLive. We're going to go a little big picture for 2019. These are the guys that are already in the fold. When you look at the remainder of maybe who they're going to come after and what the offensive class for 2019 is going to look like, what kind of strikes your fancy?
Yeah, I mean, there's the Truss kid, Xavier Truss at Rhode Island, the four-star offensive lineman, and it probably moves close to the top of the board right now. You wonder if Penn State has missed a boat with John Metchie, the four-star wide receiver out of Sharpsburg, who has seemed to be on commitment watch for quite a long time now, and he's getting some other suitors to come into play. So those two are the name to watch. You have the I believe it's Jamarcus. I don't want to forget. It's Wheaton, the Florida receiver. I know you can remember the last name, but at this point, all the names run together. But
it's all right.
Bob, to me, I guess what I'm curious about is they're going to have, maybe at this point they have 8 commits, so they probably have 10 to 12 spots left. How many more do they want to fill on offense when they have some pretty talented guys that are young already here? That's the question I think that Penn State has to answer.
Yeah, and on the offensive side, I mean, a kid like Devyn Ford, they're really stockpiling some nice running backs there for the future.
Yeah, I mean, you never know when you're going to get the next Jaquan Brisker, but when you can go 2 for 2 in terms of getting the number one running back in the country, I don't think Penn State's ever done that before in back-to-back classes, and certainly it sets you up for a lot of promising things to come, along with what you would hope would be a strong junior and then potentially senior campaign for Miles Sanders.
Okay, fourth down now here on the Blitz, and hopefully we'll get some questions and comments after fourth down. But fourth down, big picture recruiting defense for 2019. Who's next, Greg, on defense, and should Penn State fans be aware of the name Zach Harrison?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, he is as big and as mammoth of a prospect as they come. He could play, I think, honestly, he could skip his senior year of high school and play in college today. The defensive end out of Ohio is probably going to go to Ohio State, but he is far and away the top wish list guy, if you will. And then the one that is a little bit interesting at this point is Lewis Sine, the formerly Massachusetts 4-star defensive back. He now lives in Texas. Penn State was the far and away front runner before he moved, and it seemed like he might be ready to commit. Then he went down there, Texas A&M, some southern schools got involved. Obviously, he missed a run on secondary guys here. You just wonder where things stand with him. But those are the two to sort of keep an eye on at this point, some defensive linemen as well.
And a quick follow-up, you didn't see this coming, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Right. So when you get a 5-star kid, you never really have him until he signs. Right. And there's been some history there, even with Micah Parsons. They had him, they lost him, they got him back in the 2018 class. And you look at a kid like, I think, Justin Fields, who they had, a 5-star quarterback, and he ended up at Georgia. So with Brandon Smith, do you get the sense that Penn State feels pretty secure about his commitment, or do you think that possibly he might be there might be some wooers for him down the road?
I don't think so. Quiet kid that's played things close to the vest, doesn't really care for the drama of recruiting or the hoopla of it with social media and fans and things like that. So I would be shocked if he went somewhere else. Now, can you ever rule anything out in recruiting? No. Could coaches move on and things change and happen? Yes, no question. But do I have any reason to think he won't end up at Penn State? No, I don't at this point in time.
All right, awesome. All right, that's the fourth down. So, Greg, the only thing left to settle, the only thing left to decide is anyone prepared to ask us some questions or some comments?
Yeah, there's lots of action on Facebook, so let's get to it.
All right.
First one for you, Hunter Johnson, former Clemson quarterback, 2017 5-star, Penn State target at that point in time. He's transferring, leaving Clemson. To you, would it make sense for Penn State to go and try and get him on the roster? On one hand, you have Sean Clifford, you have Tommy Stevens, you have Will Levis, and you have Taquan Roberson. all coming for the battle to replace Trace McSorley.
Jake Zembeck.
It's
a crowded house, Greg. It's a crowded house.
So the question is this guy someone Penn State should look at to add to their quarterback room? Does it make sense? He was a very highly touted recruit.
Sure.
He was, behind Kelly Bryant, and I think he thinks he can play somewhere soon.
Yeah.
I don't know if Penn State would make any sense for him. I mean,
right.
I mean but what do you think? Is it worth even looking into if you're Penn State or no?
What I've heard already that a couple of Big Ten schools might be after him, and there might be some interest on his end. I think Purdue and maybe Northwestern.
Yep.
I think Northwestern has Clayton Thorson, but he's kind of getting on in years.
He has to be he's been there forever. It has to be his last year.
Yeah, and
right?
Jeff Brom is a former college quarterback, the Purdue coach, and I'm sure they're looking for an upgrade as well. I think it speaks more to what he sees. I don't know that if I was him, he just was behind a pretty good quarterback. I don't know that he wants to go to Penn State. There's a lot of bodies to step over to get that job. It might be easier at Northwestern or Purdue for sure. He's definitely going to play, but I don't know if that really makes sense from his perspective. I don't think I would be really surprised. Let's put it that way if they added him.
Yeah, I guess it would make sense in the standpoint of if you wanted the guy that was a little bit older and more experienced than what you have, but he was a 2017 recruit. It's not like this is a junior. Like if you don't, maybe you want someone to compete with Tommy Stevens that's a little bit older.
Yeah.
You could find that in the transfer market, and this guy's a city-year. So I guess the other question would be would you take him and then have him sit through the Stevens era and then see where things shake out on the other side? I don't think
He's already sat once, and I think Tommy Stevens' head might explode if they added another quarterback after they did the big deal about him looking around and deciding to stay. Right. I think Penn State's pretty set at quarterback.
All right, Vince wants to know who will start for Penn State at running back. I think it's Miles Sanders. We'll be right down that list. Looking at a couple of these, what do you think Penn State's record will be? Who will they lose to?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a long way out. There's a lot of things we don't know about Penn State or its opponents. But what is your sort of ballpark as you look at things right now? We talked a little bit earlier. September's going to be tough.
September's going to be tough, and just from a travel and a game time perspective, I mean, they're going to play Illinois on a Friday night, I believe.
Yes,
correct.
Yes, 8 p.m.
Late in September, they get Ohio State here. It should be a night game. The Pitt game's now a night game. I don't necessarily know that Appalachian State is a team you want to open the season with, just because they're not really scared of anyone, and they do have some athletes. So I know that we just saw that I think they opened up as a 4-touchdown favorite. Penn State did, but I mean, there's something to be said for Appalachian State. They're not really scared to play good teams, and Penn State might have a little, especially breaking in some players on defense. They might have a little bit of a tussle on their hands there. To me, I think it is, since James Franklin's been here, this is his most challenging schedule. What they have going for them is almost all of their significant games are at home. The road trip at Michigan, to me, stands out like a game that I'm sure Michigan is going to be pointing to, especially now that Shea Patterson is eligible to play quarterback. I think that's big for their offense. And late in the season, I think they have to play a Wisconsin team that when you have an offensive line and a running game like that, they always travel well.
Yes.
And I do think that's the kind of team that, as long as they don't fall behind, they can give Penn State some trouble, just because their offensive line is probably going to have 3 or 4 players play in the NFL. They have 1 or 2 first-round picks, I believe, on that offensive line. I think it's a great schedule. I think if you're a Penn State fan, you should be excited about this home schedule. And I do think, top to bottom, this is the toughest schedule I think that Penn State's going to play under James Franklin.
Do you have an early prediction, win-loss?
I do think they are. I'm either going 9 or 10.
Yeah.
I do think the losses are significant. I do know it's great to have Trace McSorley back, and he's going to be a quarterback on the field, and I know they feel very good about some positions on defense. But when you play that many teams in the Big Ten that are pretty good, I think there is kind of a war of attrition, and you're not always going to bring your A game every Saturday. James Franklin talks about focus. It's about this team, and I know that he's got the team believing that. But I think you saw last year after the Ohio State game, I think Michigan State caught Penn State at a great time on the schedule.
Yeah.
And I felt like Penn State was the better team and just didn't win the game. And I think that will probably happen to Penn State once or twice. I do think the Michigan game, probably Obviously Ohio State's going to be tough, but that Michigan game looks to me like it's going to be very tough as well.
All right, last one, Bob. Preseason rankings are starting to filter out.
Yes.
Penn State number 11 in the Athlon Sports poll that was released on Monday. Fair, unfair, or just right?
I think they're just outside the top 10 to start the year. They have a little bit of proving to do. James Franklin recently on his Caravan Stop said we're a top 10 program. But when you lose as many players and the quality of the players that they lost, and the schedule that they're playing, I just think that, in another year, maybe I would say having Trace McSorley in all these games at home is enough for them to make a serious run at the top, inside the top 10. I do think, though, that another 2-loss season is a real possibility, and if they don't get into the Big Ten title game, it's probably going to be tough to keep them inside the top 10. I think that's about right.
Yeah, I think so as well. I think that, there's some teams always in preseason rankings that are a little bit higher and a little bit lower than they should be, but we've talked about this before, but anywhere between 9 and 12, I think it's fair to slot Penn State. You could say maybe, shuffling, because, the Athlon poll was Wisconsin that was a little bit ahead of them. Could them and Wisconsin flip-flop? Sure, but Wisconsin has the Taylor kid coming back at running back, the 4 or 5 line.
Alex Hornibrook's coming back.
Hornibrook's coming back as well, yeah, so we'll see. But
Orange Bowl MVP.
That is all the questions we have this week.
For now, but if we have another recruiting week like last week, there better be a lot more questions. Unfortunately, I think we're going to have to wait for the next big recruiting surge.
I think you're probably
for Penn State. 5 in 5 days, considering the caliber. That's got to be one of the better runs he's had since he's been here, James.
Yes, absolutely.
So
it's certainly among the best he's had in his career, and I think in terms of his years at Penn State, they've had some runs where they've gotten a lot of kids in a short amount of time, but when you talk about the overall quality of this group and how high they're rated, there's no doubt about it.
All right, that's a wrap then on the latest edition of the Penn State Blitz here on PennLive. Just want to I want to wish everyone a happy Memorial Day weekend.